Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the session after lunch, which is not always the best session to be in, but we are. It's going to be good, I promise you that. I want to introduce to you Karl, Dinkelmann, and Zjaen Coetzee. So Karl, is Karl there? Karl, okay.
I've been called Karl.
Okay. Karl is the CEO of Nexus Data, and he's got nearly 20 years' experience in data analytics and business strategy. He's a chartered accountant and co-founder of Nexus Data, and he leads a team of renowned data experts helping organizations unlock the value of their data. And his work has led to his team's nomination for a Microsoft Data and Analytics Partner of the Year award. And then his co-presenter is Zjaen Coetzee. He's the Executive Business Development, Business and Digital Advisor at BCX. Is that correct? Yep. He's an award-winning data, digital and business executive with 14 years experience of telecommunications and the technology sector, and has consulted for many South African top companies and government entities, building a strong international network and data leaders. So I think you guys are in capable hands.
Cool. You don't say.
Can everybody hear us? Yeah, that's good. So this is going to be awkward though, because I'm used to moving around, but we've got a camera, so we confined to this box. So it's going to get interesting. So let's maybe get into it. We're not just going to tell you how to write a book today. I don't think that's going to be conducive in the context of this forum and sort of who's in attendance. What we really want to share with you is sort of the process of how we got there, as well as the reason for this. So maybe just overall purpose. The audience of this book that we've written is specifically business leaders. We have gone through the process of giving this to data leaders to do beta reading, and we've gotten horrible feedback. And there's a reason why, and we'll get to that a bit later. But mainly it addresses that disconnect between business leaders and data leaders, right? So the priorities are not necessarily there. Earlier this morning, we also heard it from Professor Richard, is where there's this disconnect around budget, support, and mandate. And it's something that I think a lot of the CDOs in South Africa currently even face still today, and even data leaders, is they don't have that mandate. It's like, I will appoint you, I will call you a CDO, and then you just make the magic happen, but don't expect me to support you, kind of thing. So the third one then is around this whole thing around the CDO certification launch this morning. I think it is very pivotal for us locally. Main reason being is the definition around what a CDO is locally doesn't align between organizations. If you just look at the JDs on LinkedIn, you sometimes expect this guy to be a data science guru. Sometimes they expect him to be a data engineer. And then sometimes actuarials and all sorts of other stuff as well.
And he has to lead.
And he has to lead people. So he needs to be a tech person and a people person. So unicorns by other names. Yeah. So what's in it for you this afternoon? So first of all, if you're a data leader, you're going to get some insight as to why this disconnect exists and how you can actually get towards that point of what's the priority business is focusing on and the reason that you might be missing it. And our colleague Coetzee covered it very well. And probably if you follow his rule and our book, you might not have an issue when it comes to increase in bonus time. So if we just get that right, then we're good to go. You can bank on it. No, I'm just joking. As a business leader, it's going to highlight something specifically in the context of where you might be flying blind and not understanding how these moving parts are actually interconnected. Because it's not as simple as buying a data platform. It's not as simple as just bringing data people into your organization. It's very complex, and it really comes down towards, are you able to generate business value or not? And then jointly, there's a big shift happening towards this role where your CDO and your CFO is effectively then joined at the hip. And what is in it then for them as partners to make sure that your organization is then able to deliver value? So if we then take it up, use of habit, everything's touchscreen, but apparently not. So what we want to is going to go through a few questions.
Don't worry about the screen.
No. This is our notes to make sure that we don't ramble. We need to keep to the timing, and we've got a lot of stuff to get through. But we'll be showing some pictures that you'll be seeing for the first time, because we've developed a lot of frameworks out of this process. So I mean, it's to that context of the CDO. How does an organization know if the CDO is actually a good CDO or not? Whoa. And how do we know that if someone by qualification is called something, if they actually can deliver on that something? So Karl's got a wonderful story of somebody being called something, but the expectation might be very, very wrong.
Thanks, Zjaen. So when I was 18 years old, I dove into a swimming pool in a game reserve, not realizing that it's waist deep, and I broke my nose quite severely. I remember getting out of the water, turning around to my mates who were all laughing because it was antics and all sorts of tomfoolery, and I had blood from a cut on the top of my head streaming down onto my shirt and on my pants and everything, and they all screamed because it looked like a slasher had gotten me under the water or something. And they rushed me to the medical center. One of our international guests were actually at the game reserve where it happened. And I remember the doctor having a look and checking the cut and looking at my nose, and he kind of just said, here's some pain pills, take those and you'll be all right. So off I went on my merry way. I'm really young. I don't really understand whether to believe him or not, and whether his advice is accurate or not. But I could feel there's something wrong here, just wasn't sure what. 5 days later, I was still in quite some pain with my nose, and I got home, back to Pretoria, and I felt something go wrong with my nose, and I went and looked in the mirror, and it had fallen flat. My nose had disappeared. My mom said, off you go to the hospital straight away. Fortunately, we could find an ENT available, ear, nose, and throat specialist. It was 6 p.m. on a Friday afternoon, and he recognized my surname. Somebody else recognized my surname. Maybe it's for the same reason. But we got chatting, and he said, is your grandfather, Hans Erich Dinkelmann, Springbok rugby player, played in 51, 52 in Europe? And I said, yes, he is. And he said, well, I went to varsity with your grandfather. I was a first year when he was a fourth year. And so he initiated me. And he told me a bit about the initiation process, and it wasn't all that fun for him, but it was tradition. It was actually at Tux. So the consultation went on. He sent me for some x-rays. I came back with the x-rays. And he identified a fracture right up here on my nose, and he pointed it out on the x-rays. And he said, look, we have to operate immediately. Your whole septum is crushed. We have to fix that fracture. Now, I was concerned about this operation because I thought, I don't want a scar on my nose up here, for the rest of my life. They're going to have to cut open to get in. And he said, no, don't worry about that. We actually operate through your nostrils. And I said, how? That's ridiculous. How are you going to get up here through there? And he said, that's why they call us the watchmakers of the medical industry. And I thought, okay, that's a little bit arrogant. But I came back the next morning for the operation, and they wheeled me into theater, and I was lying on the operating table under those bright lights that looked like a UFO, right? And the anesthetist had put the drip in, and they had a gas mask over my face. And the ear, nose, and throat specialist, the ENT, he leaned over me with his surgical mask on, and he said to me, now I'm going to get you back for everything your grandfather did to me. And I passed out. 2 weeks later, after the operation, which went well, I returned to his offices, and he took that cap off my nose. He pulled those horrible long plasters that they stick up. It feels like they're right in your brain. And he held up a mirror to me for me, and he said, do you like what you see? Now, for anybody that knows my father, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, maybe not on the live stream, but my father has a fairly big bump in his nose. And I was born with a similar bump. But when I looked in the mirror, the bump was gone. So I didn't just get my nose fixed, I got a nose job as well. And later on, a few weeks later, I found out that all the nosebleeds I'd had before the accident had stopped as well. So this watchmaker, doctor, ENT, didn't just fix my problem, but he fixed my latent defects too. And this often makes me think about this guy in the Kruger Park that that said to me, just take some pain pills and you'll be all right. And 5 days later, everything falls flat. And what it makes me think is, I often wonder whether he was even a doctor. I wonder whether it wasn't maybe a wildlife vet, the doctor was off today, and so the wildlife come and stand in, please. And it so happened that I arrived on that day. But I realized that as an 18-year-old, I did not have the medical savvy to be able to question the capabilities of an expert and to distinguish the difference between what we now call a spuddling doctor. Spuddling is the word we describe. The word spuddle means to do a lot but really achieve nothing, right? And I wasn't able to distinguish that from a watchmaker that I actually needed in order to fix my problem. So, Zjaen, I'm going to ask you to explain the crux of that story, and I'm going to ask you the question in order to lead you to answer that. Why did we decide to write another book about data analytics?
Yeah. So I mean, it's when you first saw that word spuddling, I could relate to it because there's a lot of data people that's keeping really busy, but they're not really solving any business problems. Most CEOs today don't know, and I mean, let's not call it the CEOs, C-suite in general, don't know how to challenge their data leaders because they don't have the context. Similar to Karl not knowing how to challenge the doctor because you're trusting the doctor and he sort of knows what he does, or you would have expected him to at least know what he was doing, and just to find out later that they didn't. And really for us, there is that big disconnect currently is where, as let's call it business executives, departmental leaders, there's a disconnect between your ability to be confident in data knowledge and then being able to connect to data leaders. So you don't talk data, right? Data leaders, in general, still don't talk business, right? They're concerned about data quality. They're concerned about modern data architectures. They're concerned about generative AI, which is the new hype. All these things happening, but not really being able to articulate it back to the concept of business value. So there's that disconnect. On the other side, your C-suite in general also doesn't understand how to speak data. So if somebody comes to them and they make a proposal and say, listen, we need to make this investment, they would just say, it's fine, I trust you, you go and do it. I'm going to give you 100 million rand, let's see how it goes. And then you end up losing that. And then you end up losing more confidence in your ability to take risks, but you also then lose confidence in the ability for data to generate value for your organization. Not to put any other books down in general, but just for us to maybe highlight this is the fact that most books that exist currently today, and knowledge and even CDO certifications, those things, focus on the CDO component of it. There are very little, if any, books and literature available that addresses the C-suite at large to get them to become data confident, right? So our book does that. That bridges that gap, gives that information, and to make sure that those things comes into play. It is practical, it is non-technical. So as a data leader, if you're going to read it, you're going to get frustrated because it's not going to go into all the details and the nuts and bolts and give you modern data architectures and how you can do data flows and integration and interoperability and all those wonderful things. But really what we want to do is what we're seeing, and we had some conversations this morning as well around this, is to bridge that gap between what we refer to as the 1%ers and the 99%. There's some companies, even locally, that are able to really leverage data and analytics to drive their business forward. Discovery being probably one of them. For the 99%, they don't have a seat at that table yet. They know they want to use data. They know they want to use analytics. They know they want to make an investment, but they don't know where to start. So what we really want to do is uplift them, educate that community of the C-suite to make sure that everybody is able to participate in getting business value from data. So that being said, I mean, this is not an easy, it wasn't an easy process by any means. If you want to write a book, I think first come and have a chat with us. We will either convince you to do it or convince you to not do it. But either way, I mean, the journey has been long and arduous. So, Karl, I'm going to ask you to maybe just give us a bit of insight around what does that process entail.
Yeah. Like Zjaen said, I think I haven't even had time to reflect yet. For those of you that don't know, we submitted the manuscript to the publishers last night at, 2 minutes to midnight. I said, we're not going to stop until it's done because it's been 10 months of hours and hours and hours of effort, probably 500 plus hours each, and all non-paid, sort of own time, after hours, weekends, etc. But I think the first important thing is we had a very clear purpose for what we were wanting to achieve here, and Zjaen described that purpose. I think for me, when I met Zjaen and we consolidated ideas here. I was in contact with no less than 5 data analytics leaders at the time, in direct and continuous contact with them, where they were under pressure to the extent that their jobs were insecure. And I think that's an important note for everybody to understand, is that C-suite needs value. If data leaders are not delivering value, you are going to be released, right? Because it doesn't work for the business to continue sustaining something that doesn't hit the income statement, right? We can talk all we want about governance and quality and all of those other things, but if we're not moving the dial in the business in real terms, then it's going to become irrelevant. What we will do is going to become irrelevant. And as a consultant, I was frustrated by this because I was offering the services to achieve some of these objectives, but because I was dealing with data analytics leaders that could not justify internally the value that could be generated, it created a lot of frustration. And so we said, well, are we people that things happen to and then we complain about it, or are we people that we make things happen? And so we said, let's make this happen. Let's sit down and write this book. So I explained the timelines. I want to talk a little bit about the collaboration process. Sort of what did we decide up front? What were some of the boundaries that we set, etc. It was an interesting journey.
Yeah.
I think at a stage I was talking to Zjaen more than any of my family, including my wife. And a lot of those discussions were heated, frustrating. I think I got to the point where Zjaen would send a comment through on an aspect of the manuscript that I'd been working on, and I would look at the comment and I'd go, "This idiot, again," right? That's irrelevant, right? And then I had to discipline myself and say, okay, hang on a second, he might have a point, even though I don't see it right now. And after digging through it for an hour and using ChatGPT to try and help me decipher what he was saying, and then sometimes having to phone him up and say, what did you actually mean by this, right? You get to this gold, right? And that's really it's underscored the process for me, is the gold. The gold has been the clarity that has come out of the writing process. And so that's an encouragement to everybody. If you want to build clarity in your career and clarity in your life, a great way to do that is by writing, because it forces you to think through things that you don't necessarily have to think through now. We've also realized that what's important is the ecosystem around the book, so there's a lot of digital content going to come out in relation to that. And I think to highlight the biggest issue in the book was actually dealing with that ego, that idea that I know how this game works. And when he says something, or when I say something to him, it's the other way around as well, of course. I'm just sharing from my own experiences. He'll get a turn now. But it's dealing with those foundational things, those things that make you keep coming back and doing what you're doing. That's what keeps you going. And for me, having qualified as a finance professional and then gone straight into data analytics, basically from the beginning of my career, it's been a validation for I can actually talk the language of the CFO, right? I'm supposed to be able to, based on the qualification. But it's bringing those two worlds together, and that's what kept us going through the writing process. Zjaen, you want to add something else about the overall process of writing?
I mean, I think it's and maybe not just writing, but I think testing your knowledge in general is to not get ego involved in the process. Because as you said, it's like you will give me an idea, and I'm like, this doesn't make sense. And then you start working through that information, then you realize, I've been wrong my entire life.
Yep.
And we had many of those moments, vice versa, right? So the best way to write a book is get a data guy and a finance guy in the same room. But I mean, there's so much value throughout of this, and I think maybe before we get into the rest of the stuff, just maybe closing thought around this is when we started with this journey last year in November to where we are now, we've probably rewritten the book about 15 times, right? Because you start with something and then you realize this is not going to add value, right? So there's something that I know, but somebody else is not going to get value from this. How do you shift it the whole time? So we had this blueprint of this is the audience, this is the wording that we're using, this is the messaging, this is how you need to convey that information, and continuously check yourself against that throughout that process.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's, Sam still didn't have time to process this, but I think it's a proud moment for us to have something that's gone out there. It might be useful to 2 people, it might be useful to 2 million people, we don't know yet, but we're hoping.
We'll see.
Yeah, so then it brings us towards, and we saw something like this earlier today, and I think the cool thing is, as we're listening to the other talks and seeing what the other presenters are presenting, is you are not far off the track. You have like bits and pieces to this bigger puzzle that might get you there. And one of those things specifically is when we started deep diving into these concepts is around the distinction between determinate and indeterminate value, and why is that distinction important, and what's the value that you can expect out of it. So yeah, Karl, what do you think?
Yeah, so this distinction is really important. It's the foundation of what we do. And I think it's, if you're not listening carefully right now, listen to this, because this is really important. When we go about our business as data analytics leaders, what we try and do is we try and distinguish between tangible and intangible value, right? So we want to deliver stuff that actually moves things, and that's what we call tangible value. And then we have this intangible value thing, which is normally the soft stuff that the C-level is interested in us saying, yes, we help to sustainability. A lot of the BMW stuff that we spoke about there, helping the country to have more jobs, things like that. That's more of the intangible stuff. But what we found when we really sat down and thought about it is that on the tangible side, when you're generating tangible benefits, there's a subcategorization there that we're not really well aware of, and we need to become aware of that as data analytics leaders. That distinction is this distinction between determinate and indeterminate value. Now, I've been following the data analytics industry for 20 years, and it's always been the same thing. The drive has been to deliver actionable insights. When I look at our competitors, and I even heard it this morning in many of the sessions, that word is thrown around a lot. That phrase is thrown around a lot in different forms. And the challenge with that phrase is really that most of the time it generates indeterminate value. What is indeterminate value? It is value that is difficult to measure. Right? Now, what does your CFO think about indeterminate value? Well, great, you've given me some insights. Now what? Right? And so if we start out our journey with the objective to generate actionable insights, we are setting ourselves up to deliver indeterminate value, which doesn't really impress anyone. If you contrast that to determinate value, what determinate value is it's something that's directly measurable and it's easy to measure. So if you think about an example, like if you were running a call center and you were trying to do retention campaigns, and you were delivering a data analytics solution, a churn analytics campaign that was determining which customers are going to churn, and you were passing that on to a retentions function. They were doing some calls to those functions, and they were actually retaining business as a result of your model. That would be determinate value, because I can actually measure the revenue that I lifted up, right? Now, the difference between the two in terms of effort is huge. Because when you generate indeterminate value, it is dependent on things that are within your control. You can typically do that with the team that you have, because you can build models and you can create dashboards and you can do reporting and you can pretty much easily generate indeterminate value. And it's what you're good at. But when it comes to generating determinate value, it is a completely different kettle of fish, because all of a sudden you have to deal with components that are beyond your control. You now have to interact with the business, not to gather their requirements, but to get them to change their process. Because have any of you been in that situation where you've brought this beautiful baby of an analytics model to the business and said, yes, something amazing, and their response is, where did that come from? Who sanctioned this? What do you need me to do with it? And it's this negative, frustrated response that was not what you were expecting, because this is an incredible baby that I've built here. And what happens? They chuck it out. And this is why we have such a high failure rate with data analytics projects today. It's because at the beginning of the project, what we're doing is we're setting our objective incorrectly. We're saying we're going to deliver actionable insights. Your objective at the beginning of a project should be to deliver measurable value that is published, which means that from the beginning, you gear yourself up for those collaborative discussions that have to take place early on, so that what you deliver isn't a surprise, but it's expected. And so the business is welcoming what you're doing, and your IT function that now has to integrate that model into their application that they manage, has it on their roadmap, and they've got the budget, and they've got the resources, and they've got everything they need because they knew it was coming. And so you have an ecosystem working in together with the business to make sure that these things can get delivered so that determinate value is delivered. We're going to talk just now about a role that will actually enable that and make that a lot easier. I think Zjaen's going to be talking about that. But that's the gist of the difference between determinate and indeterminate value and why it is so important for us as data analytics leaders to aim for determinate value. Zjaen, do you want to add anything to that? Or can I show this quickly?
Yep.
Let's go with that. I'm pressing the wrong button. No. So I strongly encourage you, if you're a data analytics leader here, incorporate something like this into your process immediately. All right? This is what we call a data income statement. It is the measure of the value that we are generating as a data analytics function through data analytics-led initiatives that, firstly, it identifies and forecasts value. It shows a bit of a list of your stuff there. It measures and attributes that value. So I can see by benefit type. So sometimes I've got some indeterminate stuff I'm doing. Sometimes I've got some determinate stuff because I can't always control what the business wants. But very importantly, I'm attributing it. So I'm telling my C-suite, here's what the IT team contributed. Here's what the business contributed. This is what the data analytics function contributed. If you don't do this, you're always going to be seen as a cost center. Never as a profit center, never as a value driver, because the results you deliver are always attributed to the business where the profits are actually generated, right? You need that information. And then at the bottom here, we've got this publishing of the actual value that we generated. So that's based on a framework in the book called the IFMAPI framework, and it contains all those components there that help you to make sure that you're actually delivering what you need to the business. Am I moving on, Zjaen?
Yeah.
Okay. I want to ask Zjaen, jumping into the methodological side of the book, what did we actually do here? So we've got the traditional people, process, technology, and data model that we hear all the time at conferences, and this is how data analytics leaders operate and how they think through things. But Zjaen, we added two components in the book that were missing, and don't you want to talk us through those two components?
Yeah, so maybe yeah, let's show it. Let's maybe pause here for a second.
Yeah.
Everyone has a plan until you get punched for the first time. And for those that have watched the Drickers and Easy Fight, yeah, now they know what we know.
Yeah.
So let's go on to the next one. So throughout the process when we started this, as I mentioned, 15 times churning through this process of writing, rewriting, scrapping, rewriting, shifting chapters around. We've gone and we mapped out in terms of what is it that we actually think should be in this ecosystem. And we spent a significant amount of time on sort of understanding what these drivers are. And then when we looked at it, we realized, but the people, platform, and approach, or the process bit, has always been there, right? And very recently, people started adding data to it. But if you confine that to its let's call it its own ecosystem, you're never going to be in a position where you're going to be able to deliver value, right? Because why? You're either going to focus on optimizing a process, you're going to focus on optimizing your people, or you're going to focus on optimizing platform, not delivering business value, right? So this is what we refer to as the Rappid framework. So it's Rappid with two Ps, for those that wondered. But effectively, it comes down towards that bit of, if we want to deliver something, and I mean, I've had these conversations with Howard a couple of times, we've had it in the industry a couple of times as well, is let's say if I need to spend 10 Rand in order to get to a point where I can generate value, but I've only got 8 Rand to spend, I'm better off not spending that 8 Rand, right? Because there's a minimum that I need to get me to that point where value becomes a reality, right? So we have an entire chapter in the book that addresses investing and how you should look at investment and how that actually becomes a tangible thing for you to execute on. We touch on these things as well, right? Because they're still important. But platform for a C-suite executive is not the same as a platform for a data leader. They're interested in knowing, what does this platform mean for me, and what can I expect out of it?
And how much is it going to cost?
How much is it going to cost? and am I going to get return on investment?
That's it.
The same with people. There's a lot of factors in terms of people considerations that can limit you in terms of realizing. So if you have that investment, but your people are not optimally placed, you're not going to be on the position to actually recognize the value that you're expecting to recognize. So this has really been something that we have seen practically play out over our own careers and sort of working with people in the industry and sort of consulting. And we've seen that it's happened so many times where, and a few, let's say, practical use cases is where people say, listen, we need to invest in big data analytics. I'd say, okay, cool. I'm going to sign the check. I'm going to leave it blank. You put a number in it and we're going to go and invest, right? So they're going to invest. Let's call it a lucrative number, like $1 million for a cheap platform. And they invest in it. And then 12 months later, they realize they still haven't realized anything. The BI processes are still bad. They still have shadow BI sitting all in their business. They're not getting towards a point where business can make any tangible decisions. It's because there's things that's missing in that ecosystem. There's support needed for the data leaders, and that needs to come from the C-suite, right? And because of that, we throw money in these things, and then what happens is we lose confidence. And that's why the data confident leader would be the golden thread throughout the entire talk today, is once you've lost that confidence as a data, or let's say as a business leader, your data confidence is gone. You don't see that you can get value from data. You don't see that you can make any further investment because you've already spent so much time and money and effort on it. The rest of the business actually feels the pain. Because now your C-suite decides, listen, or the CFO says, listen, I've already thrown so much in this, and you come to me every time, and like today it's this platform, tomorrow it's that platform, then it's on-premise, then it's cloud, then it's hybrid, and then we're doing cloud bursting because on-premise is still sort of cheaper in some cases. And then we're doing entire data platforms, and we're doing data fabrics and data meshes and all these things. But the big question is, does it deliver any value? And are you as an organization actually able to recognize value? Now, that being said, there is a gap, and a significant gap that currently exists within organizations, and this is not the CDO. There is another role that we really need to pay attention to. And I think Karl, and we're going to jointly do this.
Yeah.
Let me do a bit of intro around the enterprise architecture, and then we go into it, right? So when IT first started out, they had this challenge of we want to invest in technology, but they couldn't convince business to sort of meet them halfway.
This is like 30 years ago, right?
Yeah, it's not too long ago. It's just sounds like many years ago. It was just 30 years ago. I was 7 by then. So I mean, they had this gap where they really couldn't leverage information technology to truly differentiate themselves as businesses and start delivering value. And then this role around enterprise architecture became a thing. To look at my enterprise as a whole, to look at my processes as a whole, and then to give me the best suited solutions that fit my pattern for my organization, so I can make the most out of my investment into infrastructure, IT, resources, etc. And it's taken many, many years and TOGAF and all these things to mature out to the point where enterprise architects are now at the point where they can help orchestrate IT value. The same role does not exist within the data world. We're expecting CDOs to not only provide the strategic direction, but to physically execute on it, manage the day-to-day stuff, build all the business processes, inform all those things, and then work with the IT departments to make that value work. And that's the reason why the average tenure for CDOs is 2 years, because people can only take so much before they burn out. If you look at the rest of the C-suite, some of them are sitting pretty, like 5 years to 10 years on the same seat. It's stressful, but it's not as stressful as being a CDO in a context where people don't really understand that role. So there is a missing link. What is the missing link, Karl?
Yeah, and this comes back to the indeterminate versus determinate value. I've just laid a really big dump of responsibility on you to say now you as the CDO are responsible to make sure that the business realizes determinate value out of the stuff that you're doing, right? But that's a massive burden to carry, and especially because it's outside of your realm of responsibility, outside of your area of control. And so we've actually seen some organizations do this quite effectively, where they have a separate role that takes care of that collaboration between different departments, like a cat herder, bringing together the right functions, the IT must do this, business must do this, sort of like a portfolio or program manager, sort of like a project management type of role, but it's not. It's a lot more senior, because you have to do you have to pull a lot of different levers to get your CEO and your CFO aligned to issue a mandate to the rest of the business that says, we are together going to work around this initiative to make sure that it realizes value for us. Especially considering that a lot of the times, those initiatives are new. They're risky. And I was chatting to Don about that at lunch, about how our corporate culture is a shareholder management culture, which means that I do things that bring stable growth. It's not an investment management culture that says we're going to take some risk here. Even if we don't fully understand this thing, we're going to take some risk. And so you have to have this role that brings these priorities together and gets the C-level aligned so that they can realize the value. And that role is this role called a data value architect, which we describe extensively in the book. And we explain what the purpose is. You should, by reading, be able to start appointing or identifying somebody in your C-level or one level below that can start playing this role for you. It is a game-changing, powerful role that will see you as a data leader starting to be able to generate a lot more value than what you currently are able to, because all of a sudden you have the support of a superhero that's moving and shaking things that you currently struggle to move and shake. So I strongly recommend that you consider looking at that sort of role and start thinking about appointing someone there. Okay, I think that's all we have time for in terms of the main content. We're going to jump into some questions. That's okay. We can. You want to do the mic thing? Yes. Go.
Yes, hello, hello, hello. There we go. Thank you.
Yeah, congratulations. I think doing what you guys did, well done. And with kids and family, it would seem so well done. Yeah, I just want to check your book. I've got two questions. If I think of Douglas Laney, he's got the 3 V's or the 3 M's, manage, monetize, measure. Or he's always got these frameworks of 3 letters. Is Rappid your acronym?
Well, Rappid is the methodology. Within Rappid, I mean, it's...
Rappid actually stands for recognize,
Yeah.
pressing the wrong button.
Okay, so Rappid is the methodology.
RAPID.
Within that methodology, there is 9 frameworks. And each framework addresses, so we have a framework for people. We have a framework for investing. So the Douglas Laneys love the work, but it's for CDOs. Bosch Mazos love him, love his book, but it's for CDOs. This is for business. This is for the average guy that doesn't talk data. Right? So practical frameworks in this Rappid framework that actually delivers, or the methodology that delivers separate frameworks that can help you address each one of these things.
Yeah.
We also acknowledge that all organizations might not be on the same level of maturity and facing the same issues. So you can nitpick almost the areas that you feel that is important or more relevant to you. But investing and recognizing value is the 2 key things that then anchors the rest of the frameworks. Yeah.
Thank you. And then the second question, just your picture on the data value architect. So at MTN, we've got a chief strategy officer that plays that role, that brings the IT, business and data priorities together.
Yes.
And it's a very, very successful role in our organization, and we all report in there. So we don't have a chief data officer, we have a data value architect with a strategist.
Yeah.
I just wonder, right, in that space, so that is now, a done deal. They will never look at a chief data officer at MTN because they think that guy does it. But then on the data governance side, they believe the chief risk officer looks after data governance. So, I mean, just give me your thoughts on this, because I think in South Africa specifically, it's a very small market, and our C-level suites, and I mean, we can see it now with Cell C, they've got a chief revenue officer and some other roles. But I really struggle to figure out what's really the strategy here for our corporate C-level roles. But it's all very confusing, and I think if you articulated that that very well in your book. Well done. But I think that's one of our
We
biggest
have an
things.
entire
People don't
chapter
really
around
understand,
that.
right?
Yeah.
We have an entire chapter around that, and that is specifically, I think, so two things. One is every C-suite actually has different priorities in terms of how they execute. Although they all say we're moving towards the same strategy and we're executing, those 5 pillars and stuff that you have in your annual results statements, is they have very specific things in terms of what they execute on and how they deem value to be. We address that quite extensively in the book, in a lot of detail, right? So that's the one thing. So when you have your copy of the book, you will have that. The second part of it is, in South Africa specifically, I truly believe we haven't really understood what the role of the C-suite is. And it's for a couple of reasons. Take the CDO as an example. There is no standard in terms of what we define a CDO to be. So in some companies, the CDO is just a team member of finance, or a team member of risk and governance and compliance, or even somebody within the IT department, right? So at some stage when I looked after data, I was part of IT, right? Imagine that nightmare. So we haven't really gotten that right. So that's where that CDO certification becomes important, because it now classifies you as to what you should actually be able to do and that box that you need to fit into. The challenge that we have is companies moving from CIOs to CTOs to chief digital officers because they have a bit of an identity crisis. If you understand what value is and what value you want to generate, doesn't matter what you call the person. If they're able to operate in that framework, it is ideal. What we have seen, and the reason why we proposed the data value architect, is that we're putting too much pressure on a CDO that has certain things that they need to execute on. You need an impartial party that can bring these worlds of IT, business, and data together in order to generate value. And as Karl mentioned, it's only in those instances we're actually generating real value.
Cool. Well done, gents. Yeah, I know the pain. I got the first email, was it last year this time?
Right.
Cool. So quick one, going back to first question. I mean, Douglas has done quite a lot of work around this, and he's more on the balance sheet side than the income statement side in terms of trying to articulate what the value of data is and using it for different purposes. I think I spoke about the raising of capital. The challenge that I've found in my own personal experience is that on the income statement side, and I try to do that because I don't want to have that cost center budget discussion with the CFO, right? Is that at an experimentation level, it's a lot easier to clearly articulate what the value delivered is. But the minute you put it into production and there are 20 other things that contribute to that very same metric, it becomes easily diluted. And for example, if you take revenue, or even you use the call center example, most of those efficiencies, be it you're cutting call center agents' heads, they sit in particular business units. So actually they are not necessarily flowing back into your direct cost center. And the guy on that other side, even though they're benefiting from your intervention, they are the ones dancing, right? And they can claim other interventions in their world to say, I did this with my people. So the minute it goes into production and leaves that experimentation, what do you recommend is the most effective way to still extrapolate the value from your work so that even going forward, you justify that value? And what's your view on the economic value of information measurement from Doug versus what you guys are articulating?
Yeah. So I'll take this one.
Yep.
The International Financial Reporting Standards define an asset as something from which I will be able to generate future economic benefits, right? So that's a very accounting thing to say, and I do apologize for that, but that's the foundation of the discussion. Because what we try and do is focus on the balance sheet and say, I want to value my data, but if I'm not generating value from it, it has no value, right? And you've highlighted the exact issue that we have is I generate this great thing, and it produces some value, but I cannot pinpoint the value, and so it becomes very difficult to measure that value, and so I can't really measure the size of the asset. So that's a whole debate that I don't really want to get involved in, because I don't think that's the purpose of the debate. The real issue over here is when you are not able to measure the value of your investments, so what those investments produce, it affects your confidence to invest. And the outcome of that is that organizations fall behind. Because your competitors, being confident to invest, will invest more than what you can. And even if they're failing, they'll fail faster and they'll learn more. And very soon you might be out of business. And that's the whole. So is it worth going and measuring that? Yes, it is, because it builds the confidence to invest. So you've got a team of data analysts. Put them on measuring where the value came from. Put them on attributing that value properly. Build it into the solution from the start, that we're going to know that this amount was generated by that. Because then I can take that back to the CFO, and that's where the relationship works well, is if I can get the Chief Data Analytics Officer or the CDO talking to the CFO in the right language. That relationship works when the CDO is reporting back on value generated, because then the CDO feels more confident to invest. And then report back on value generated and invest. That's the cycle that you want to create in your organization in order to get free flow of investment that generates a lot of value. Okay.
Thank you very much. There's from our online audience a question, but I think you are going to say it. What is the name of the book?
Drive Rapid Results from Data.
Drive Rapid Results from Data. Thank you very much.
Cool.
Simple.
We just got one more thing you have to cover, and I'm sorry to take a little bit more time than what we should. We're going to make an early access version of the book available today. If you want to, you can scan that code or you can type in that link. You will get access this week. It is a publishing copy or publisher submission copy, which means that it's not final, but it's very close to final. And what we're going to ask for in return is we want your feedback. So you're going to read it. You're going to have to do quite a quick read, and we're going to be on your case a little bit to give us feedback. But it gives you access to the book, it gives you the opportunity to provide us some feedback, and it gives you the possibility of us publishing your feedback in the book along with your name. So if you'd like to get that, you can. If you just want to join the waiting list for the book, and you don't want to read it quickly and get access to it immediately, you can also scan the code and just select the option in the question that comes up and say, no, I don't want to provide feedback. Then you'll just join our waiting list for the book. And then over the next few months, we'll keep sending you updates. And when the book publishes, hopefully in January 2025, you'll know. You'll get early access then. And you'll be able to purchase the book to read it for yourself.
Good. Thank
Cool.
you. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Just have something small for you guys.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you. I think that was a great presentation. I think we can give these guys a hand.